We all know how Zoro never really ate a devil fruit in the original series, but despite that, he's still crazy strong with not just 2 swords, but 3. However, what if Zoro had eaten a devil fruit, specifically Enel's devil fruit? How many things would change in the world of One Piece? While training in the forest to face off against his childhood rival, Quina, Zoro stumbles upon an odd-looking fruit with spikes coming out of it. Ignoring the fact that it looks like a loquat growing thorns, Zoro proceeds to eat it, and the next thing he knows, he accidentally burns down a tree using lightning. Zoro hurries back to the dojo, where his master tells him that what he ate was a devil fruit, which seems to be a low Gia type, harnessing the power of thunder. Upon regaining his composure, Zoro resumes his training in the 3-sword style, intent on becoming a stronger swordsman to beat Quina without the use of his power. Much like in the original timeline, tragedy strikes, and Zoro soon departs and becomes a bounty hunter with Wado Ichimonji in hand. Years pass, and Zoro gains infamy as a pirate hunter, all the while pursuing his dream to be the strongest swordsman in the world. He eventually finds himself on Shell Island, where the Marines capture him while he's attempting to save a young girl. Despite having the ability to break out of his bindings whenever he wants, Zoro stays put to ensure the girl's safety and opts to deal with the starvation penalty placed on his head. Around this time, a certain aspiring young pirate comes along and sticks his nose in Zoro's business. Luffy, himself on a mission to find strong crewmates, decides that the pirate hunter would make a splendid team member. Luffy learns that Helmeppo does not intend to keep his promise to Zoro and tells the bounty hunter the same. Luffy offers to help Zoro recover his swords, but the bounty hunter refuses. In the next moment, Zoro's bindings are vaporized as the swordsman becomes pure lightning and escapes, leaving Luffy's jaw on the floor and the Marines in shock. Zoro then proceeds to blitz his way through the Marines, defeating even Captain Morgan in an instant. With the Marines burned out and lying on the ground, Zoro decides to go find his swords, but Luffy stops him. Determined to make Zoro a member of his crew, Luffy tells Zoro that he will fight him. If Luffy wins, Zoro would have to join the crew. Astounded at Luffy's will, even after seeing him take down an entire Marine base, Zoro begins laughing and agrees, saying he won't even need his swords for this fight. Zoro tells Luffy to give him his best shot, confident that Luffy won't be able to lay a finger on him. 2 seconds later, Zoro is sent flying into a wall, dumbstruck at the fact that despite his intangible powers, Luffy was able to hit him. Luffy begins laughing and prepares another fist. Realizing that he's at a significant disadvantage, Zoro dodges the attack and blasts Luffy with some insane levels of thunder. But there isn't any effect. Turns out Luffy's rubber body is completely immune to Zoro's thunderous abilities. The two duke it out for a while longer, with Zoro getting in a few hits too, until they collapse from the fight. Zoro proclaims that he would never be on the losing end if he had his swords, but a deal is a deal. Considering his loss and being impressed with Luffy's unyielding spirit, Zoro decides to call it a day and join up as a member of Luffy's crew. The two grab Zoro's swords and set sail into the world. The newly formed Straw Hats soon end up in Orange Town, where the dastardly Buggy is in control. Unfortunately for the Paramecia user, absolutely no one from the Buggy Pirates stands a chance against Zoro's power, and Luffy barely has to lift a finger as Zoro zaps down the pirates left and right. The two recruit Nami and soon head off to Syrup Island, gaining another crewmate in the form of Usopp, along with a ship. Just like in Orange Town, absolutely no one is a match for Zoro's swordsmanship coupled with his lightning abilities. It isn't until the Barati that Zoro finally meets his superior. After decimating Don Krieg, Zoro comes face to face with his goal, the strongest swordsman in the world, Dracula Mihawk. Much like in the original, Zoro faces off against the Yonko-level beast using just his swords while Mihawk taunts him by using his tiniest blade. The battle progresses, and Zoro is clearly on the losing end. It isn't until Mihawk pierces Zoro near his heart that he finally brings out the big guns. Zoro's body starts blitzing where he stands, and in a flash of lightning, Zoro appears behind Mihawk and attacks the strongest swordsman. Mihawk, despite being caught off guard, is quick to use Yoru to block the attack aimed at his back. The swordsman takes a step back, realizing he's up against a devil fruit user. Zoro stands in front of him, lightning firing off from his body. He tells Mihawk that he didn't intend to use his Logia powers in this duel, as he wanted the fight to be purely about swordsmanship, but he realizes that his opponent is too strong to hold back. All Mihawk does is smirk as his haki begins to envelop his blade. Up against a Logia, this is the first time any of the Straw Hats, including Zoro, see how haki is used by their opponents. Mihawk praises Zoro for pushing him to bring out Yoru, but tells him that the result will still be the same. Unsure of what power Mihawk is displaying, Zoro goes for a head-on attack. Backed by the speed of his lightning, Zoro tries to blitz through Mihawk, but Mihawk's slash lands first. Zoro reforms behind Mihawk with a deep gash in his chest. Zoro's swords break, but he continues to barely stand, turning around to face Mihawk. As Zoro begins losing consciousness, Mihawk tells him that there are much bigger fish in the sea, and that even Logias can be cut with haki. The swordsman sheathes his blade, choosing not to finish off the wounded Zoro, and allows him another chance, telling him to get stronger. After the Barati arc, Sanji joins the crew while Zoro recovers from his wounds. Once healed up, Zoro begins training his swordsmanship along with his devil fruit. At the same time, having felt the impact of haki on his body, Zoro starts trying to figure out what this power truly is. The crew soon end up in Arlong Park, much the same as in the original timeline, except Zoro makes quick work of his opponents. At the same time, Luffy Luffy also begins to get a sense of what haki truly is. Arlong is stomped before the events in Logtown occur. Here, Zoro gains the Sandai, Katetsu, and Yubashiri. More stuff happens, and Luffy eventually gets captured by Buggy. Unfortunately for him, though, Zoro simply blitzes to the execution platform, frees Luffy, and absolutely decimates Buggy, leaving poor Dragon with no reason to show up. The crew escapes and heads to the Grand Line, but by this time, a certain upset has occurred. Instead of Luffy, Zoro is considered the strongest member of the crew, and has the highest bounty. Dragon still steps in to stop Smoker from capturing Luffy, although it's doubtful Zoro would have allowed it. The Straw Hats head off to the Grand Line, where they meet Crocus and Laboon. Similar events to the original story happen, but the key difference is that Zoro and Luffy ask the former Roger Pirate what haki is. The crew spends a bit of time in the area as Crocus demonstrates what haki is, showing the crew how it works. Having gotten more of an idea of the mechanics of haki, the crew heads off to Whiskey Peak. The events are much the same, with the members of Baroque Works being pummeled, and the crew taking aboard Princess Vivi. The crew proceeds to power through Drum Island, gaining Chopper as a crew member before making their way to Alabasta. Zoro makes quick work of Mr. One, while also learning that he can cut through anything. He sustains 0 wounds in the battle, and goes on to face Crocodile with Luffy. By this time, something spectacular happens. Having understood the feeling of haki and faced off against an intangible opponent, Luffy and Zoro both display armament haki. Their newfound power, combined with Zoro's Goro Goro no Mi, proves too much for Crocodile, decimating the villain, and foiling his plans to take over Alabasta. Nico Robin joins the crew, Luffy and Zoro train their haki, and Skypiea proceeds uneventfully as there isn't any spectacular villain to pose a threat to the Straw Hats. They later encounter Kuzan, only this time, Luffy and Zoro are able to last much longer against Kuzan's Devil Fruit abilities. After being spared by the Admiral, the crew proceeds to wipe the floor with all their opponents, gaining Frankie and Brook along the way before the stage is set for Sabaudi Archipelago. Everything is similar to the original timeline until Kizaru and Kuma show up. The moment of truth takes place as the crew is sent flying by Kuma, one after the other. Only this time Zoro is able to avoid Kuma's attacks right up until the end. Despite the fact that Zoro is a Logia user, and he and Luffy are able to use armament haki, they are still no match for Kuma. Just as Luffy is about to be sent flying by Kuma's pawpaw fruit, Zoro latches onto him, and the two are hurtled across the sky to Amazon Lily. Prior to this, Zoro would have taken a beating like never before, as he actively tried to fight against both Kizaru and Kuma. By the time the two land on Amazon Lily, Zoro is extremely wounded and unconscious, with only Luffy up and running. Luffy hides Zoro in a cave as the events on Amazon Lily take place. After appeasing Boa Hancock, Luffy checks on Zoro's condition, having presumably forgotten about his friend. Zoro, unsurprisingly, is up and well fed through his hunting before Luffy retrieves him. The Kuja tribe allows the two to stay on the island until Luffy learns of Ace's capture and upcoming execution, indirectly through Momonga. Upon hearing that Ace is being kept in Impel Down, both Luffy and Zoro head off and infiltrate the prison. The battles with Magellan are avoided thanks to Zoro's incredible speed. The two quickly meet up with Ivankov and soon get to the bottom of Impel Down, freeing both Crocodile and Jinbei. Much like in the original timeline, the two land in Marineford, smack dab in the middle of the war. Only this time, the two Straw Hats have haki, and Zoro is an absolute beast against most opponents. Upon arriving at Marineford, Zoro and Luffy work together to ram through the Marines and soon reach Ace at the execution platform. With the Whitebeard pirates at their back, Luffy can finally free Ace, with Zoro standing both as a fence and as a way for them to retreat. As the two brothers are making their hasty retreat with Jinbei and Zoro working to clear the way, Whitebeard comes in full force, ordering his crew to retreat as the world's strongest man shakes Marineford to its core. Sakazuki chases after the brothers and pushes Ace back with his magma. As he's about to land a devastating blow on Luffy, someone suddenly appears to take the attack head on. That someone is Zoro! With his katana imbued with haki and lightning surrounding him, Zoro clashes with Sakazuki, stopping him from delivering the killing blow to Luffy and saving Ace in the process. Zoro's rage bursts through him as he screams at Sakazuki to stay away from Luffy. Conqueror's haki suddenly rushes across the battlefield, knocking out Marines near him. Ace appears in the next instant and rams Sakazuki to push him away from Luffy as Vista and Marco come to defend the two as well. Whitebeard soon arrives, enraged, and smashes Sakazuki brutally. Recovering from the impact of Sakazuki's attack, Zoro, Ace, and Luffy support Whitebeard and his commanders, proceeding to further devastate the island. In a shocking turn of events, Whitebeard, although mortally wounded, and his crew are able to defend long enough for Shanks to arrive and bring an end to the devastating war. Much to Blackbeard's and the Marines' dismay, the Whitebeard pirates escape from Marineford with their lives, having saved Ace but with Whitebeard on his deathbed. His wounds begin to take their toll as the legendary pirate calls his commanders and Ace to him. Whitebeard states that Ace will have to carry the mantle of captain of the Whitebeard pirates and tells him that he would carry on both his and Roger's legacy. Whitebeard soon passes away from his wounds as news spreads around the globe that the Yonko has perished and that Ace has taken on the mantle of becoming an emperor of the sea. Realizing that he needs to get stronger, Zoro, along with Luffy, begins training under the Whitebeard pirates after sending a hidden message across the globe to their crewmates, stating that they will meet at Sabaudi Sabaody in 2.5 years. During the events of the time skip, Zoro trains under both Vista and Ace to further develop his swordsmanship and learn how to use his Logia powers. Meanwhile, Luffy learns from the other Whitebeard pirates, and their training takes them to unprecedented heights by the time 2 years have passed. At this point, both Straw Hats have mastered both armament and observation haki due to the sheer level of tutors around them, but they soon receive word that another pirate has been given the title of Emperor of the Sea. Don Quixote Doflamingo has defeated Trafalgar D. Law and used the Ope Ope no Mi to gain immortality, effectively upping the ante to become one of the strongest pirates around. He breaks off his agreement with Kaido, enraging the strongest beast, and develops his own faction to a previously unknown level. Hearing of recent events, Ace aims to head to Whole Cake Island to make a deal with Big Mom to form an alliance, or somehow gain the Road Poneglyph. Luffy and Zoro choose to head off to Sabaody Archipelago to meet up with the rest of the crew, while at the same time, Kaido moves to get back at Doflamingo for betraying him. After reuniting with the rest of the Straw Hats, the gang ends up facing some pacifistas, which they quickly decimate. The crew then gathers and goes to back up Ace in the potential fight against Big Mom. The current events send tremors across the world. In an unprecedented shift, 4 of the 5 emperors are possibly going to face off against each other, while the red-haired pirates remain in the shadows with no apparent plan to participate in this war. Meanwhile, the Marines have appointed Sakazuki as the new fleet admiral, who has ousted Kuzan, with 2 other admirals joining the ranks. Garp and Sengoku have retired. Blackbeard is cooking up his own schemes in the background, as his initial plan to get the Goro Goro no Mi has failed. Prior to meeting up with Ace, the crew is approached by Germa 66. The events play out much like the original timeline, with Sanji being used as a bargaining chip and a bid by Big Mom to gain more power through Germa's technology. With Sanji having left the crew, the Straw Hats meet up with Ace, giving them even more reason to go to Whole Cake Island to retrieve their crewmate. Whole Cake Island turns out much differently this time compared to the original timeline, as the Straw Hats arrive in full force along with Marco and Vista. Ace stays back with the rest of the Whitebeards to avoid a full-fledged war, and the Straw Hats manage to break into the facility. The gang infiltrates and retrieves Sanji with the added firepower they have, instigating Big Mom to follow them and meet on the sea, setting the stage for a showdown with the full might of the Whitebeard pirates. Landing on an isolated island, the 2 crews prepare to face off in one of the most epic wars since Marineford. Ace and Luffy prepare to take on Big Mom herself with Marco in tow, while the rest of the Whitebeard commanders line up to fight Big Mom's high-ranking officers and commanders. As the fighting commences, prominent pirates such as Smoothie, Cracker, Snack, and Oven join the fray to fight against players like Vista, Jozu, and the others. Zoro heads off to fight against Katakuri in a bid to test his mettle against the strongest commander the Big Mom pirates have to offer. As these 2 face off, it becomes a test of power between an incredibly strong Paramecia and a Logia swordsman. Katakuri displays the full extent of his devastating attacks, but by now, Zoro has significant mastery over both his Logia abilities and how to use them in tune with his swordsmanship. The fight begins with Zoro electrifying his body and blades, using his speed to take Katakuri head-on. Despite his speed, Katakuri's observation haki proves to be equally capable, as the commander uses his foresight to predict Zoro's attacks and take him head-on. The fight rages on, with neither side giving the other any moment to rest. Soon enough, Katakuri counters, with hardened Mochi coming at Zoro from all sides as he thrusts his trident towards Zoro's chest. Despite blocking the attack, Zoro is pushed far back as the battlefield rages on. Getting a moment to stand, Zoro begins focusing his energy as dark clouds form over the island. His katanas glow bright yellow as they become imbued with haki and lightning. Using his full might, Zoro launches a massive dragon made of thunder at the commander. The attack is enough to significantly damage Katakuri. Meanwhile, Luffy and Ace are engaged in an intense deathmatch against Big Mom, who is showing them what a Yonko truly is. Conqueror's haki begins crackling between Zoro and Katakuri as the 2 prepare to give their all in their final blows. Zoro summons every ounce of his strength to display a move unlike any other. It seems as if he suddenly gains multiple heads and arms, with electricity crackling all around him. Katakuri prepares to take on the attack head-on, forming Mochi all around him with his awakened devil fruit. As Katakuri leads the offensive, Zoro unleashes Raijin Ashura on him, leading to a clash that sends ripples across the island. When the smoke clears, Zoro is barely standing, with Katakuri on his knees behind him. Despite the odds, Zoro prevails. At the same time, Big Mom has significantly wounded Luffy as Ace tries to stand his ground. Despite Zoro having won his battle, along with many of the Whitebeard pirates, most of them are barely able to fight, and Big Mom doesn't seem to be backing down. But just as the sounds of thunder dissipate, another sound begins to reverberate across the battlefield. The sound of drums! Luffy's hair suddenly turns white as haki envelops him, revealing his devil fruit to be the mythical Zone type, Model Nika. With newfound power to bend the world to his will, Luffy begins bouncing around like a child, his strength so immense that he starts overpowering the Yonko. Even Ace steps back in awe as he watches his brother fight against Big Mom. Luffy's power is so overwhelming that it isn't long before he overpowers the Emperor and sends her flying into the sea, spelling victory for both the Whitebeard pirates and the Straw Hats. After defeating Big Mom, the Whitebeard pirates and the Straw Hats sought to recover from the ordeal. They wouldn't be allowed to rest for long, though, as Shanks suddenly showed up with the red-haired pirates. Luffy hadn't seen Shanks in an incredibly long time, and the reunion was long overdue. Shanks praised Luffy for how strong he had become, while at the same time complimenting Zoro for being Luffy's support. Unfortunately, Shanks had grim news for the pirates. He told them that Kaido was going to set sail after the reverie to meet Doflamingo on the island of Dressrosa to take revenge. The former warlord himself had allied with Blackbeard and his crew, and the two aimed to take the One Piece before bringing chaos to the world. Shanks warned that the world government would not sit still and would take advantage of the opportunity to attack the emperors and bring them down once and for all. He further informed them about the threat of the Gorosei, the elders at the top of the world government, and how Luffy might be the only person who could take them on. To prepare the pirates for the worst, Ace told Luffy that he would train him and Zoro on how to utilize their conqueror's haki and awaken their devil fruits. Training with Shanks commenced as he showed both Luffy and Zoro how to harness the power of their conqueror's haki and use it as a weapon. He further guided Zoro in the art of the sword. Considering that Shanks was once a rival to Mihawk, the training made Zoro progress by leaps and bounds. Usopp also had the chance to catch up with his father, Yasopp, as the three crews spent their time training and developing their skills. Meanwhile, the Marines were preparing their own secret weapons, the Seraphim. As the reverie approached, gears were shifting across the world. Kaido set sail to fight against the immortal Doflamingo and the Blackbeard pirates. The red-haired pirates, white-beard pirates, and the Straw Hats were wrapping up their training. The Marines were planning to attack both Kaido and Doflamingo after their war. The Revolutionary Army was poised to attack Mary Geoise itself, considering the opportunity it would present with the Marines a way to fight the Yonko. All the players were set, and the first to make a move was Kaido. The massive dragon landed on Dressrosa ahead of schedule, just as our heroes neared their destination. The Marines, too, were closing in on the island, unbeknownst to both Kaido and Doflamingo. The two parties clashed on Dressrosa in a frightening display of power. Kaido, in his dragon form, laid waste to the surroundings, but Blackbeard used the Yami Yami no Mi to absorb Kaido's devastating attacks. The rest of the commanders and Doflamingo waged war against each other, with Doflamingo's eternal youth and awakened devil fruit proving to be a significant menace. Kaido kept his distance from Blackbeard, continuing to launch bolo breaths to keep the devil fruit user occupied as his beast pirates fought against the opposing faction. The war wouldn't remain undisturbed for long, though, as the Marines suddenly arrived with the full force of the Seraphim and the Admirals, landing on Dressrosa. This caused enough of a distraction for Kaido to turn away from Blackbeard and focus on the Marines. Blackbeard took this opportunity to backstab Doflamingo. He used his power to nullify the former warlord's devil fruit and absorb the immortality granted by the Ope Ope no Mi. Our heroes finally arrived as well, but by this time, Blackbeard had become a force to be reckoned with. The Seraphim were wreaking havoc on both parties, and Kaido was fully engaged in battle. Zoro was the first to crash onto the battlefield like thunder, sending shockwaves across the island, followed by Ace, Luffy, and Shanks. The Marines found themselves in a precarious spot as Kaido temporarily allied with the other emperors, while Teach, having achieved his goal, retreated with his crew. The Marines now faced the unprecedented might of three Yonko at the same time, an insurmountable obstacle. Zoro quickly rushed toward Fujitora at blinding speed, while Luffy and Ace went to face Kizaru and Aramaki. Meanwhile, the Revolutionary Army launched a full-fledged assault on Mary Geoise, led by Monkey D. Dragon himself. Only a few Marines, including Garp and Sengoku, were left to protect the world nobles, but the odds quickly turned against the Revolutionary Army as the Gorosei made their appearance. Considering the yokai power the elders wielded, the Revolutionary Army soon realized they couldn't fight off the constant regeneration and apparent immortality of the Gorosei, who appeared in their full yokai form. They quickly retreated, realizing the battle was unwinnable. Meanwhile, the Whitebeards and the Straw Hats fought against the Admirals, with Shanks and Ben Beckman staying on the sidelines. Their involvement wouldn't be delayed for long, though, as large circles of dark energy began forming on the battlefield. Before the opposing factions could comprehend what was happening, the Gorosei appeared on Dressrosa in their yokai forms. Backed by the Admirals, the world government had finally come in full force. Shanks then joined the fray. Zoro, Luffy, and Ace, realizing the obvious threat posed by these new combatants, quickly concentrated their power and awakened their devil fruits. Zoro singled out the sword user among the Gorosei, Saint Ethan Baron V Nushiro. Nushiro immediately recognized Zoro's Sandai Katetsu as kin to his own katana. The other emperors and Luffy joined the fray as well, taking on each of the five elders while the commanders continued fighting the Seraphim and Admirals. Nushiro proved to be immensely skilled with his sword, but Zoro managed to land a few mortal wounds. The only issue was that Nushiro quickly regenerated and continued the fight, focusing on Zoro. Meanwhile, Luffy's power protected him from injury, but even he struggled to deal any lasting damage to the elders. Shanks, on the other hand, was constantly spewing haki as he clashed with the elders, though he seemed to be restraining himself for some unknown reason. The battle waged on, but it seemed that no side was gaining the upper hand. Realizing that a battle of attrition could not be won, Shanks ordered a retreat for all the parties. The pirates fought back against the might of the Marines and somehow managed to retreat, though not without facing many casualties. They regrouped with the grim realization that entities such as the Gorosei existed, and despite awakening their devil fruits, they had been unable to make a lasting impact on the villains. News of the Revolutionary Army's retreat also spread, along with the fact that Blackbeard had once again disappeared into the shadows. Would the Pirate Alliance eventually be able to take down the Gorosei? What role would Blackbeard play in this timeline, now that he was effectively immortal? What about the secrets of the Void Sentry and the mysterious figure sitting atop the empty throne? There were many directions the story could go, but one thing was certain. Zoro's long-awaited rematch with Dracula Mihawk was finally at hand. Landing on Kuraigana Island, Zoro walked toward Mihawk's castle. The world's strongest swordsman greeted him at the door, and the two immediately began measuring each other with their haki. Dracula realized that Zoro was now strong enough to give him a real fight and unsheath Yoru instead of the smaller blade he had used in their previous encounters. With his dream in sight, Zoro readied his blades as dark clouds began forming in the sky. His katana glowed bright yellow before taking on a dark sheen coated with armament haki. Zoro's body blurred as he became the first to move, charging at Mihawk. The strongest swordsman met Zoro's blow head-on, deflecting each strike with Yoru as Zoro put more power behind every swing. Realizing that brute strength alone wouldn't be enough, Zoro summoned his lightning and unleashed a devastating three-sword strike. Mihawk responded with a technique of his own, clashing with Zoro's attack and sending shockwaves across the island. The battle intensified as the two warriors attacked harder and faster, with crackles of Conqueror's haki spewing from their blades. Their last clash sent both of them hurtling backward, the shockwaves parting the clouds above. The battle raged on for the entire day, stretching deep into the night, with both warriors pushing each other to their absolute limits. Zoro, having spent his entire life preparing for this moment, and Mihawk, having waited years to find a worthy rival, were both elated by the fight while remaining focused on defeating the other. With a final, thunderous clash, the two swordsmen unleashed their strongest attacks, their swords meeting in a blinding explosion. The force of the collision shattered the island and sent debris flying everywhere. When the dust finally settled, both Zoro and Mihawk stood panting, their swords still at the ready, each waiting for the other to make the next move. In that moment, they were finally equals. Two warriors, bound by their love of the sword, pushing each other to their absolute limits. The battle continued, and as the dust cleared, both swordsmen were fainted on the ground. Make sure to subscribe and smash the like button for more One Piece videos!